was just like, I just want to sit here for 5 minutes and get in the zone. Is anyone else like me in that regard? It takes you a little while to, okay, 3 of you. Well, I'm going to do a call to worship for the 3 of us so that we can engage with Jesus today. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to read from Psalm 18 just very slowly and let some of these words kind of sink into your soul. Let the simplicity yet the significance of what David writes here be a way for us to focus on God right now. He says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. How many of us need strength this morning? I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock. He is my fortress. He is my deliverer. My God, my rock, in whom I take refuge. He is my shield, the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from all my enemies. Father, we come to you this morning, you who are our rock. We look to you as our salvation, you who we can trust, you who are our safe place. You surround us like the walls of a fortress, so that the things which try to assail us cannot succeed. We are thankful that you are stable in the middle of a time and age where things seem to be changing faster than the days. You who never change. This morning we look to you and worship. Let's stand.
Jesus' blood and righteousness, my identity. Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the heart inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, 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 you're never gonna let me down. 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 You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh. Night is holding on to me. God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding
This morning, Father, we celebrate your goodness, the way you hold us, the way you reach out to us. We don't deserve your grace. Thank you for your love. Amen. God is in.
Good morning, everybody. Good to worship together. Well, as a bunch of you know, last week Sean and I weren't here. A week ago today, we were celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary. Yay! In a hobbit hole. Up outside of Reading. Highly recommend it. Very cool. Second breakfast was wonderful. It was really good. And it's kind of funny because, like, when we had planned this, we had planned, a while back to celebrate this, reserve that thing, 2 nighs up to outside Reading, but the last minute, we added 3 days ahead of it to go down to the coast in a little pop-up trailer, and that was fun, out on Rice Beach. But that's kind of, the reason that's funny is because between the Coxes and the Montoyas, we have this thing going where we actually, kind of the elders and the stewardship team told us, you're granted a certain amount of vacation time, but you guys don't take it all. Which I don't think, I don't know if I've ever taken all my vacation time in my whole life that I've been given where I've worked. And that's not a good thing. Like, you need to do it. So we have this running competition to try to get each other to do it. We actually have agreed to at least make each other take 10 days, a year. We got more than that, but at least 10 days. Like, that's like the bare minimum, But we've got this running competition going, and so we had 3 days just to catch up with Coxes. And actually, I think we're adding another couple. We're going to get ahead of you, before the year's out. The end of the year is coming. We've got to do this. But think about that for a second. It's kind of silly. It's kind of goofy. It's kind of weird that we have to play these tricks and do these things to try to get ourselves to do what's good for us. To just go on vacation, to rest. And I think that's a great picture this morning of what we're going to look at. We are in a series, kind of a series within a series. We're doing the second half of Exodus, and in that, we are in kind of a mini-series inside it as we look at what are traditionally called the 10 Commandments, but what we're calling, along with the Jewish people, the 10 words, the 10 utterances, and the one for today, word 4, the most unusual, I would say, of them all, is the Sabbath. And it's unusual, it creates all kinds of confusion among Christians, what to do with this one. There's a lot of stuff about it that we're going to get into. But I would say this, though, the little story I just told, as we're approaching it, that's a good way to think about it. Of all of the ones, this one is one where it's just weird that we have so many problems with this one. Of all of them, this one should probably make us the happiest, and yet we argue about whether we should even keep it. Christians argue about it. Should we do that? Yeah, should we do this? It's not just for the Jews, is that for us? Hopefully by the end of today, hopefully we can change our mindset and realize that if we're asking the question that way, then we don't understand it. We don't get it. So hopefully we can get into this and get a new understanding of the Sabbath. But before we do that, let's just do a quick recap. Again, 10 words. We've done 3, and this one is situated, I think they're in a particular order. This one is sort of transitional in a way, as I think you'll see. The first one, word 1, was this word of grace. It's not a commandment. There's nothing in there for you or I to do. It's a statement from God about himself toward us. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It's a statement of his grace, his work, what he has done, that he has brought us to himself. It's a statement of his love and his rescue. And then that leads then into word 2. Connor covered that one. You shall have no other gods before you. You shall not make any idols. And so he says, I freed you And now he says to live out and live in that freedom, this is the first thing you need to know. Do not turn away to other gods. I'm the only God, because I'm the true God. I'm the only one that if you devote yourself fully and entirely to me, you will experience freedom. If you get fooled into making anything else your God, and I don't care if it's a good thing, it's not just an evil thing, even if it's a good thing, if you make it a God, you will become enslaved again. You will become enslaved. So to stay free, you need to keep me in the rightful place. You need to return the love that I've already lavished upon you. And then that brought us to last week, number 3, you shall not carry my name in vain. Caleb covered that last week. Did a great job of helping us see that that's more than just using God's name in sentences a certain way. But it's the carrying, it's the representation of God to others, which sort of moves it outward a little bit. How are we representing God to those around us, His nature? And so what comes next flows out of these 3. And today is, again, like I said, a bit of a transition because it's very essential. Today's Sabbath, what Sabbath does, it's situated right in between where we're going to move into now some commands that have to do with the way we deal with one another in this world. These were more focused on us towards God. Sabbath is a command to us, but what Sabbath is going to do, what Sabbath, just to sum up its purpose, Sabbath is a time to stop and it kind of pushes us back to these 3. It grounds us, regrounds us again in these 3 so that when we move back out into the world, into our week, we can do the next 5. Right? No, this is 5. The next 5. No, sorry. The next 5, because this is number 4. Yes. 6. I can do math. The next 6. So, Sabbath is going to be really key. It's an unusual one. And basically, coming out of these 3, living in His grace, keeping Him as our first love, making it our aim to represent Him in the world, what comes next is what follows from that. So the question is, what does a life built on God's grace, built on God's love, returning that love, and then reflecting that love, representing that love to others, what does that look like? And Sabbath is the first place to start. So let's read it. Again, this is a subject, of all the 10, you guys, like, I could do a 5-part sermon on this one. Of course, you need today to do a 5-part sermon on anything. It's good that that's not going to happen. This is a deep, rich one. This was a really difficult one to prepare for because I just want to say, hopefully this opens a door, and I would encourage you to go through that door and in conversation with one another, reading whatever it takes to continue to explore this. Because this cannot be summed up in one short sermon, okay? I just want to say that. So let's look at it, though. Strange one. Exodus 28-11. God says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male or your female servant, or your cattle, or the sojourner who stays with you. Now there's a lot of reasons why this is the oddest of the 10. One is just the fact that it's very unique to the Bible. I mean, there's other ancient codes of moral behavior you can find, and on those lists you're going to see don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, and other such things. It's not like, the Bible's the only place that says not to do that. This is the world over. People recognize universally these things. And it's not like you don't have the concept of rest from work in other cultures, ancient or modern. But what's unique about the Bible is that it puts this idea of Sabbath and rest, it includes it in this list of 10. It puts it up there with idolatry and murder and stealing and adultery. The fact that it's raised so high, in fact it comes before those other ones, right under idolatry and what God's done for us. And so the significance that the Bible gives it is what makes it unique. What does it mean? Let's be really simple about this. Very simply, the fourth word is telling you, he says, remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Say, remember to stop. Because Sabbath, Shabbat, the Hebrew word, simply means stop, cease. I know you want to immediately think rest, and that's okay because the two are closely associated, but don't run there so quickly. The word just literally means stop, cease. Cease from work, cease from your sort of normal activity. Stop. And then, after that, once you stop, well, now what are you going to do? Of course, rest is often associated with it. But Hebrew has other words for rest, and it even uses it in relation to Sabbath. But Sabbath means stop. Stop. And the million-dollar question, of course, is why? Why is God so insistent on us stopping? And I just want to say, before we look at the reasons he gives, here in the text and elsewhere, why Sabbath, why stop, is we need to think again if Sabbath is a gift. This is a gift of God. Yes, it's a command, but more than anything else, it's a gift. It's unusual compared to the others. The others are saying don't do, these bad things, or don't do this, don't do that, or their converse way of saying love your neighbor, which is a good thing. But this one is a gift to you, to us, something for us to help us. It's a gift. It's the reset button, like I said earlier, that's meant to get us reconnected to words 1, 2, and 3. But what are the reasons that God gives? How does this work? He tells us. The thing is, he tells us in 2 different places why Sabbath. Here in Exodus, we're going to have a reason we're going to look at. It comes right after the command to do it. But the book of Deuteronomy, a couple of books later, Deuteronomy means second law or second, it's considered the second giving of the law. Exodus and Leviticus lay out the law, and then you have Numbers, and then in Deuteronomy it's 40 years later. And 40 years later, the people of Israel, having wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, are standing on the brink of entering the promised land, and Moses gets them all together, and he basically does a recap. He rehearses everything that's gone on in the past, and he restates a lot of what's already been said, including the 10 words. What's fascinating is, if you read the Deuteronomy passage, it's a little different. Specifically the Sabbath. What he says about the Sabbath, the reason, it gives the same command, but the reason for keeping the Sabbath is different. So first let's look at Exodus. Exodus says this, after saying, you shall not work, your manservant, your maidservant, all these people, your kids, your donkeys, don't stop. Okay? Why? He says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he made it holy. So the first reason given, he points back to creation. We call it the creational reason. By creational we mean way before we fell into sin, way before even, it's just saying after God made everything, he stopped. And when he stopped, he said, this is a stopping day, and he set that day apart. And therefore you should do the same. That's reason one. But then in Deuteronomy, it says, stop, you work. But listen, look at the so that and the why. So that your male servant and your female servant may rest just like you, as well as you. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. And the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So one points back to creation. The other point, we call this the redemptive reason because it's pointing to their redemption or their rescue. It's embedded in this Exodus story because you were once a slave. Remember, you were a slave and I rescued you. So in honor of that and remembrance of that, stop working and make sure everybody around you, including your own servants, everybody stops working. So why the difference, and what's the connection between the two? To understand it, again, you've got to think of a big biblical story. Remember, the Bible is a giant narrative, it's a bunch of narratives, one big narrative that ends up pointing to Jesus. And the big, the outline of the story is creation, fall, redemption. In fact, many humans write stories, they tend to write them that way because it's kind of written into us. The things are made, they're unmade, and they're remade. God creates, sin enters the world. The rest of the Bible is a story of God redeeming, fixing, recreating, new creation, which culminates, of course, in Jesus. The Exodus story is pointing ahead to the ultimate fulfillment in Jesus. Put that way, we see the importance of work. God works. God creates for 6 days. And he ceases. And what's the Exodus story all about? When God comes to rescue his people, what's he rescuing them from? He's rescuing them from work. Work at its worst, at its most cursed. Because what happened in the garden, if you remember, is that after they sinned, they put themselves in the place of God. They violated the second word. The curse that came about because of that was the very God-given work that they had was broken. The woman bringing life into the world, now it's pain, suffering associated. And then the work of gardening, the work of bringing goodness and order out of this good world, a continuum of God began, is now cursed. Thorns, thistles, drudgery, pain, labor. And then the Exodus story takes this to a climax, we're to a descent, to slavery, the worst form of work. So, looking back again at the first one, at the Exodus reason, the creational, why? Let's tease out the actual reasons given. What exactly is the point of doing it because God did it? I mean, mainly because we're supposed to be imitators of him. But how does it look? Here's a creational reason. So God makes everything. It says that he looked at all that he had made, and he says, it is very good. So he stops, he looks at it, and he goes, this is good. And then he sets aside that day and says, he hallows it. It says he makes it holy. Now, it says he rested. And God didn't rest because he was tired, okay? And you go, oh. It's the stopping. The point of Shabbat is the stopping. It's what the biblical writer, what God is trying to say to us is, the emphasis in Genesis 1 is Creator God. He made it all. He wants to draw our attention to the fact that he made, and he stopped. That there's something important about the stopping. It's done. It's finished. And it's time to pause and go, it is very good to just rest in that. It's good. I'm sure you all have experienced that. I've experienced that. I like to do, it's actually very restful for me. We'll talk about this in a second. It's sort of counterintuitive, but taking a break from my normal what I do, which I love, being pastor, but the most restful thing for me is actually to do what other people consider work, which is honeydews around the house. It's a great arrangement. It's fun. I like it. One time I built this little gate on Dean Road, actually, when I had that house. There was this gate, and I built this little gate. And I remember when I finished that gate, I love projects like that because unlike the pastoring, which feels like it's never done, the project is like, you go, it's got a beginning, a middle, and end, and you're done. But what's really funny is that once I'm done with my little gate, how many times, if you had a camera on me, I walked out, for the next 24 hours, and stood and looked at my gate. It said, it is very good. That sense of satisfaction, a job well done. There's a goodness in that. And God draws our attention to his stopping. Now we're made in his image, which means we're like God, but we got to be careful because remember the serpent tried to make us like God in a way that we're not like God. Like we aren't God. When we pause, when we keep Sabbath, God God says of creation it is very good, and we pause and say and agree with him. Part of Sabbath is to stop and look at his creation and his work and say it is very good. To recognize the goodness of God's creation and the goodness of God behind it. To stop. Because in work, we're constantly trying to fix what's broken, or even continue what he's doing. That's fine. Like continue to live out fullness and go be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. But there's a time to stop and just look at what is and say it's good, it's enough, it's okay, it's good. So the first reason for stopping, there it was. I didn't realize I had it, but that's when God. By the way, notice it says, by the seventh day God completed his work which he had done. He rested. And he rested. That's the English. The Hebrew is Sabbath. Ceased. It would be better translated, he stopped. He ceased. We see rested and we think he's like sweating or something. It means he stopped. He stopped. That's the point. So the creation reason, the first one is simply worship. Stopping to say thank you for what God has done in creation. As we'll see, fulfillment in Christ, new creation, thankfulness. Stopping to say thank you and stopping to admire the Creator, to give praise, to see the God behind it. To not get stuck on creation itself, but to see the God behind it. The second reason for stopping is an issue of accountability. So, kind of like the same reason that God said, there's a fruit, don't eat that fruit. That was meant to keep us, he said, look, I'm putting you in charge of this whole thing, okay? I'm making you rulers over the whole earth, but you're vice regents, you're under me. So this one, put a little circle around this one thing, don't touch that. Or not don't touch that, don't eat that. Accountable dominion. Dominion, but you're not absolute. You're not the absolute monarch. Similarly, what Sabbath does is it places us in our proper place over creation, but under the Creator. When we stop as sub-creators, as ones who carry out the work of God and work, stopping reminds us we're not in control. Ultimately, we are not in control. Thankfully, God forces Sabbath on us every day of our lives. We physically have to stop and sleep. We can't not do that. It's not a choice. You can try, but you'll only last a certain amount of time. And then you will literally just fall over and fall asleep. But think about sleep. You're unconscious. You're in control of nothing. That's your most vulnerable state. For 6 to 8 hours, you are checked out. And whatever's going on in the world that needs your attention is not getting your attention. And then you wake up in the morning and you know what? It's all still there. It didn't go anywhere. So stopping is a way of acknowledging we're not God. And God is perfect. God never sleeps. He's running the world just fine. As messed up as this world is, nothing's taking him by surprise. It's all part of his plan. It's got to be okay. Keeps us humble, keeps us in our proper place, over creation, but under the Creator. So what about Deuteronomy 5, the redemptive reasons? Again, these two things, so that your male servant may rest like you, and you shall remember. So taking them in reverse order, it's these two things. First, it's to remember. And I think that, if you have to sum up Sabbath, it's stop. Remember the Sabbath, right? Remember to stop so that you can stop and remember. Remember to stop because you've got to stop in order to remember. That's most important. And in this case, to remember what God has done for you. He rescued you from slavery for them. Rescued you from slavery. How dare you, having been rescued from slavery, impose that on another? So give everybody a break. And this relates back, again, somewhat to Caleb preached on last week, this representing God well, this imaging of God outward. What you have received, you give. You have been forgiven, now you forgive. You have been rescued, so you bring that to others. Bring that redemption. It's, the Exodus story, harsh labor, all this kind of stuff. It's funny when Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and they say, let my people go. Yahweh says, let my people go. What is the ask in it? If you remember back when we did this series, what does it let them go? They're going to the promised land, they're never going to come back. The ask to Pharaoh was, they just want to go 3 days into the desert wide and worship Yahweh. That was the ask. So Pharaoh's thing was not, I'm losing my workforce. No, I'm losing them for 3 days. And what is Pharaoh's response? He says, I don't know. First of all, he goes, I don't know Yahweh. I don't know who he is. I don't care what he says. So first he violates the first one and says, I don't worship your God. But then he says to them, he says, I don't know, you draw the people away from their work. Get back to your labors. He says, look, the people in the land are many, and you would have them cease from their labors. Guess what the Hebrew word is? Shabbat. You would have them Shabbat. The writer is trying to get you to connect work and worship. Now there's a sense in which our work can be a form of worship, but there's a type of worship that can only be done when we cease working. When we stop, we give up our control, and we come into the presence of God and one another and remember the most important things and leave our work behind. So, and then, again, we end up passing that on to others. Now, how does this relate to us? So those are your reasons. It's an act of worship to God. It's an act of remembrance. It's an act of accountability. It's a stopping and saying, God, you're God, and I'm not. It's all these things. This was given to the Jews, and now people, Christians go, well, do we do this? Well, I mean, think about all those things. So first of all, how is this all fulfilled in Christ? Now, Jesus comes and he says, I'm here and I'm working. My Father is working and I am working. What was the work that Jesus came to do? Well, again, we have both the Genesis thing going on and the Exodus thing going on. The Genesis thing is we go from creation to new creation. Jesus is coming to bring new creation. He's doing the work of new creation. But then the Exodus thing, which is the freedom from slavery, that's what he came to do. He came to free us from not just physical slavery, but from slavery to sin. And of course, where does he get that work finally done? On the cross. So hanging on the cross, he says, it is finished. His last when he breathes his last. It's done. This is on a Friday afternoon. And then what? Shabbat begins. After he says, I'm done. In Isaiah, when it describes the suffering servant, the Messiah who would suffer and die for the sins of his people, he says he will see the fruit of the travail of his soul and be satisfied. Jesus said it is done. It said for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. What was that joy? It was the satisfaction of the fruit of the travail of his soul, which is us. He says it is done. New creation is done. I've done it. I've redeemed them. I've rescued them. And he's satisfied. It is very good. It was worth it. The work was worth it. My death was worth it. So that's how it's fulfilled in Christ. But it gets tricky. So now what do? Okay, it's fulfilled in Christ. So what does that mean? We're saved. Yay. We have Jesus. So what do we do with Sabbath? What do we do with it? Do we just get all spiritual and say Jesus did it? No, we don't. Well, no. This is where we need to understand, again, the place of the law and the place of what God is doing. Someone's out there worshiping. we got to be careful about, even though the spiritual, the bigger, you've got to see that. The bigger, it kind of pulls up in the lesser, but we don't leave the lesser. It doesn't get left behind. God wants to make all things new. He wants to touch all of life. And so these principles of Sabbath remain, because this is the way we were made. This is the way we were wired. We still need to stop. We still need to remember. This is for our spiritual nourishment, our spiritual health, more than ever. I mean, this is why high church churches, what do they do every Sabbath when they gather? They celebrate communion every Sunday. Why? Because they gather to remember, to stop and remember what? The redemption, our Exodus story. We stop and we remember because we forget so quickly, especially when we're working. We forget. So, what does it look like? The question we could ask is, how would I honor or fulfill these reasons given as a follower of Jesus? Jesus, the Word, creational, the Word, He is the Word through whom all things were made, and through whom all things are being remade. Firstborn of all creation. So I'm a follower of He who, by whom was created. That's the creational. Well, what does it look like to follow Him and keep Sabbath? And following Him who was the suffering servant, who redeemed me from the bondage of sin. Jesus, of course, has these words, very Sabbathy. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And my yoke is easy, my burden is light. He calls us into rest. So here's where, the interesting thing about Sabbath is that it's a rhythm, right? It's just basic, Old Testament Sabbath, seventh day, take a rest, just take into your work of your week. It's a rhythm. Well, what comes first, the work or the rest? How would you answer? How does that work? Is it do you work and then you rest, or is it you rest and then you work? Anybody have an idea, the answer to that question? That's obviously a trick question, so be careful. It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm. But the reason God puts the punctuation mark on the rest is that it's best to think of it as we work out of rest towards rest. That's how you should think of it. We should be working out of rest towards rest. Don't think work's the main thing and oh man, but then I get a break. Whew, okay, good. Isn't that nice? I got my little break. But boy, let's get back to the important stuff now. No. It's rest. This isn't just physical rest. Ceasing from work, remembering, focusing on my salvation, on God's good creation, on God's goodness. And any practice you can do to see that happen on a rhythmic, weekly basis is then going to feed into the way you do work that week. Your work will be more redemptive. It will come from a good place. And then, of course, and that work is all pointing towards a rest. In the grand scheme, Jesus initiates a great Sabbath, and yet, remember the now and the not yet? We're all waiting for that final rest. When we will all cease from our labors, the promised land, when it's all done. And so, we have this picture of coming out of rest, doing God's work, doing our actual work, which, by the way, there's not that huge distinction between whatever your job is. This is all touched by God. This isn't like, secular work and then Jesus work. No. All the work you do is work of ordering and filling. You're pushing against chaos all the time. A bunch of you know that. You're pushing against chaos. And you get weary. It's a weary world. It's hard. And you need to stop. You need to stop. You need to realize that ultimately you're not in control, and that's okay. And you need to get reconnected to the Lord your God and what He's done and your salvation. Now, as we wrap up here, like what I want, application, sermons and application. I'm always at war with the application. This one in particular, there's a bazillion applications. I got a long list, but I'm not going to give you the long list necessarily, because the problem is there's a tendency to, when I start saying things, that you think I'm saying, thou shalt now do this and do that and do this and do that. Instead of seeing them as examples, I really want you, maybe your first Sabbath exercise is just to sit and meditate about Sabbath. Or maybe get a book about it or something and start learning it. Because this is a lifelong practice. It can't be summed up with a couple of neat little, oh, try this thing, you know. And there's your Sabbath. If you reduce it to just, I took the day off, you're not getting it. And by the way, to get a little practical, it isn't just, oh, I veg. Now, vegging a little on the Sabbath is a good idea. I'm not saying don't veg, but if all you did all day, if you took a Sabbath day, and you just like watch TV all day, I would say you kind of wasted your Sabbath. Because there's not a real richness in that. But if you watched your favorite program as part of, hey, knock yourself out. I'm not watching my favorite program on Sabbath. Yay! Maybe I'm going to watch 2 episodes of it. Because it's Sabbath. Cool. It relaxes you, it rests you. Great. See how this is difficult? Like, you've got to keep the meanings in mind. It's got to motivate this. It's a time to sit back to enjoy your own work. It's a time to enjoy God's work. It's a time to reflect upon God and His goodness to you. So don't cheat yourself, I guess is what I'm saying. Our tendency, we don't always want what's best for us. And so we can kind of ruin our own Sabbath, either by not taking one at all, or by taking a pretty shallow one. There's so much more for you, though. God wants to replenish your wells, your heart, with Him in His presence. And being with one another. And I mean, it's a long list. Like, I'll give you another example, which could be completely taken wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. Maybe don't shop on Sabbath. We got a gasp over here from all. Now again, I'm not going to make a rule out of it, but, you know, Lowe's has, what's Lowe's tagline? Their little motto. Do you remember? I used to have it. I don't think I have it. Never stop improving. Right? Never Sabbath on improving is what that says. So sometimes you do need to stop improving for a day. Just rest in what is. The reason I say shop, okay, Bob, we'll see if we can get through you here, is 2 reasons. One, he says, don't you work, neither your servants or this person or that. If my rest depends on you working, what is that all about? We live in a consumer economy. When we switch to a consumer economy, a lot of bad stuff has happened. And this is one of them. Is that I understand on Sabbath there are some things that need to keep going, hospitals and whatnot. But we're just a free-for-all now. And so lots of people got to work instead of take a Sabbath so that I can enjoy myself. That's not good. That's not seeing Sabbath as a communal thing. It's not just an individual thing, it's a communal thing. So that's one. The other thing is, this part of consumer culture is satisfaction, contentment. Sabbath is about stopping and going, it's enough. It's enough, I have enough. I'll tell you what, Amazon, it just feels so good. This is why I got to buy. And then like a day later, there it is. You know, it's amazing. It's like magic. I need more. I need more. We'll get to covetousness in a few weeks. Sabbath says, no, I have enough. I have enough. The list goes on, but you could see there's a richness here. I encourage you to explore it and enjoy it. It's a joyful thing. Again, if we are asking the question, do we have to keep Sabbath? We don't get it. That's like saying, do I have to go on vacation? Do I have to rest? Do I have to enjoy myself? Do I have to replenish my soul? Really? Do I have to replenish my soul? Darn. Really? That's a stupid question. If that's how we're asking it, we don't understand the gift of Sabbath. We don't understand the gift of Sabbath. So, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden." This applies not just to your physical jobs, but to the weariness of your souls. We live in a broken world. It's being remade. We're not in charge. We have the privilege to come alongside Jesus in the reclamation of his broken world. But it's hard work, and we get tired. And he calls us away to a lonely place. He calls us away to a place of quiet, of cease this activity. Get back with me. Replenish your soul. And I encourage you to take him up on that. It was commanded, it was made a law. Why? Because it's a tutor. Paul says it's a teacher. It teaches us a rhythm. You got to make a kid do things. You got to make them eat their vegetables, right? Supposedly later they grow to like it. I don't know what's wrong with me, but the tutor. But just because you're out from under the tutor doesn't mean you leave behind the lessons. Oh, good. I don't have teachers anymore, so now you just blow all that off. No, that's not the idea of education. You need to live into it. C.S. Lewis once famously said, law becomes gospel, grammar becomes poetry. The dance steps give way to the dance itself. So the law of Sabbath teaches us how to do Sabbath. But once you understand it, and you can do it like a dance, well, who doesn't like dancing? Only people who don't know how to dance, right? That's me. I just feel like Elaine, in Seinfeld, sorry. That's it. Let's close on that. In fact, I want to pray a prayer, a Sabbath prayer, not the one in Fiddler on the Roof. I found this other, and I kind of edited it a little bit. I want to close us as we sing now, our doxology. I just want to pray this Sabbath prayer over us. So I ask you to just enter into this. God of rest, today we make the active choice to enter into your rest and to join with you in delighting in this good world that you have made and dreaming of the perfect world that you will remake. In stopping, we remember Eden. We rest because you rested to enjoy what you have made. In stopping, we remember Egypt. We rest to remember how you freed us from slavery. In stopping, we remember eternity. We rest to look forward to the eternal rest that we will enjoy with you, God. I choose, oh God, to tune out of the demands and deadlines, of performance pressures, of flickering screens, of that which robs my soul of joy, and the ways in which the world seeks to define and shape my identity. I choose to tune in to your affirmation and love, to the celebration of freedom, to worship in your word, to the enjoyment of that which fills my soul with joy and reminds me of my identity in Christ as a deeply loved child of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
with you. Have a beautiful week.